Hello, my name is Alexia Vernon, and welcome to Improv for Coaches, simple activities to accelerate transformation. You are in the right place if you are feeling somewhat scarce-sighted to be here today, meaning it feels a little bit frightening given that the topic is improv, but you're also excited because you have a sense that this could be something that's going to support you, not only as a coach, but also as somebody who's looking to cultivate her or his or their thought leadership. So you might be here today because the thought of improvising makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable because you have some performance anxiety, or you might be here because you are somebody who actually has a performance background and you haven't figured out how to be able to take some of that and infuse it into your coaching and into your own thought leadership. You may be someone who is brand spanking new to coaching or maybe to leading group experiences, and you want to ensure that you are creating as much transformation for the people you work with as possible. But I also want you to know that if you've been coaching for a long time and you're recognizing that you just need some new strategies to spice things up, you're also in the right place too, meaning that everything that I share with you today is designed for a beginning, an intermediate, or an advanced audience, because the focus is how can you support your clients, whether they are individuals or groups, to be able to accelerate their transformation more quickly. So I want to share with you a little bit about me and my background in this work. So prior to hanging out my shingle as a coach back in 2007, I did have a background in improv and performance, but I want you to know that it was complicated. So while you'll see here that I trained with the Second City in Las Vegas, where they used to have a training center and where I call home, and I used to teach improv at the City University of New York's John Jay College, I didn't have the best relationship with improv for a lot of years because I was somebody who was always planning what they were going to say, which, as we'll discover today, is not such a good scenario when you are trying to lead improv experiences or participate in improv experiences. And the reason I wound up teaching improv, because you might be thinking to yourself, that sounds really strange that somebody who's a planner would wind up teaching improv, was because I had applied for a position to teach acting and more traditional theater studies. And I was told you can have that class if you will also teach public speaking and improv. And at that same time, I was also leading professional development for a nonprofit arts education company, using role play as a way to help nonprofit and social justice leaders speak up for the ideas and issues that they were passionate about. But running in the background during this time was a little secret that I was pretty scared of public speaking, even though I found myself frequently landing in opportunities where I was being asked to speak. And so I want to take you back a number of years to when my relationship with all of this work changed fundamentally, and I started to really look at opportunities to speak, whether they were improv based or whether I was giving a presentation on behalf of my coaching business, as a good thing. So if we time travel back, I had been a coach at this point for probably about, I would say maybe 3 or 4 years. And I had the opportunity to be the closing keynote speaker at a prestigious social enterprise conference. And I got to the event a little bit early in time for the participants' pitch fest, which meant that all of the approximately 100 people who were in attendance at this event had a couple of minutes to present their big idea for how to harness entrepreneurial solutions to solve a big social, economic, or environmental problem. And the pitches across the board were fantastic. They were bold. They were well-researched. They were full of heart. And the finalists at this event were chosen by the other people in attendance, meaning there wasn't an outside panel of judges. I'm sharing these important details with you so that you can appreciate why, when the finalists' names were announced, I was so surprised. I was surprised because despite an environment where everybody was around the same age, mid-20s, the room was 50% female, 50% male, not one finalist who was chosen was a woman. And so whenever I get stirred up, I I try to ask questions rather than make assumptions. And so I asked at this event, what happened? Where are the voices of the young women who are here? And what I learned, while surprising and somewhat sobering, it actually made a lot of sense. And I promise it connects back to my passion and where we're headed today in our conversation about improv for coaches. So everyone that I spoke to said kind of the same thing, that they picked based on who they thought was the best pitcher or the best speaker. And when I asked them to unpick what that meant, they would say things like, people who took up space, who projected a lot of confidence. What also meant speakers who were more male. But here's where things got really interesting. When I asked who were the speakers that you felt most connected to, whose ideas you wanted to champion, what I heard were a lot of the names of women. Why? Well, they said that the women told stories. They were vulnerable. In some cases, they were even saying things like, I should get another degree, or I should have more experience in the field before I start my own company and accept funding. And of course, that wasn't seen as good pitching or good speaking. I realized as I was hearing all of this information that I could really relate, because even though I had been on the speaking circuit in some capacity since I was 19 years old and had won the Miss Junior America competition, as I've shared with you, as somebody who tried to plan everything that was going to be said and who often used other people's research, had fancy slides to win favor, it felt terrifying for me to be vulnerable. And at the same time, I was often doing a lot of, quote, masculine things like fist pumping and trying to be loud, which wasn't my authentic speaking style. I recognize that we need a new pathway to talk about how do we give people communication and leadership confidence, a pathway that doesn't just work for women, it doesn't just work for men, that works for everybody irrespective of gender identity. And so that was when I decided I wanted to create a pathway for all leaders and ultimately for coaches and consultants to more easily be able to speak up for themselves, for the ideas and issues that mattered to them and to their organizations, and to call people to take action. And I call that stepping into your moxie. And what I know with absolute certainty, doing this for over a decade now, is that the pathway to stepping into our moxie for ourselves and for our clients, whether they're individuals or organizations, is all about role playing for high stakes situations that feel uncomfortable. And there is absolutely no better base for being able to do that work than improvisation, because it takes the stakes down and it lets us really solidify the mindset, the habits, and the messaging to be able to show up and speak up much better in all realms of life. And so as we dive into this presentation, I want to share with you the big epiphany I had after that pitch fest that I just described, which is that moxie is a mindset and it's a skill set. And too many of us coaches and too many leaders are getting in our own way of buffing it up for ourselves, but also ensuring that our clients are able to do the same. And so I want to ask you to sit with this question for a moment. What would be possible if you knew that you could use an improv-based activity to catalyze any aha moment you desired for your individual or for your organizational clients? And I'm going to encourage you to put that discovery in the chat. Because if you're anything like me, one of the situations as a coach that's coming up again and again and again, especially over the last couple of years where things have been really hard, is that most of the things that people are coming to us for coaching around have to do in some capacity with self-trust. And it can be tricky as coaches to help people with self-trust because we can ask those juicy questions, we can tell powerful stories. But if we really want our clients, again, whether they're individuals or whether they're teams, to cultivate self-trust, we need to give them real-world opportunities to actually practice that competency. In other words, asking juicy questions often isn't enough. And that to me is one of my favorite reasons for why I use improv in all of my coaching and all of my training with other coaches. For our purposes, I'm referring to improv as a form of unscripted theater where most or all of what happens, whether we're using improv in a conversation or whether we're using it in more of a training context, where all of what happens is unplanned, at least for the participant, meaning, as we'll explore today, there's a fair amount of preparation we are doing as coaches. However, we're not inviting the people who are participating, our clients, to have to think of what they're going to say in advance. The magic happens from what happens in the moment. I believe improv is a wonderful tool for coaches who want clients to get comfortable with uncertainty, who want to trust their instincts. That's where that self-trust piece comes up. And who want to have more fun and not take everything so seriously. And who, as coaches, want to do more of this for themselves. And so I want to talk about this last point quite a bit. It is okay if you are still in the process of trusting yourself, your decisions, your communication in the moment. In other words, you may not be somebody who's showing up today because public speaking feels inherently comfortable. I believe that we coach on what we've had to learn, what we're in the process of learning, and what we're committed to remembering. I know with absolute certainty that the reason I'm so much more comfortable with improv and with navigating the unknown and more comfortable not trying to plan every single outcome is because I get to do this work day in and day out. So I believe that improv can be used in numerous contexts, and my gut says that as we go through these, you will recognize some that are very central to the kind of work that you're doing with clients. But first, I want you to think about what your clients are grappling with during these times that we are in. My gut says that they're struggling with asking people to come back to work if you're working with organizational clients. If you're working with those kinds of clients, most likely you're also having to support your clients with how are they going to ensure safety, whether that means mask wearing, whether that means vaccinations. Depending on who your clients are, you might be supporting them with having to communicate these policies to their clients and having to navigate all of the discomfort that comes up when people don't always see through their lens. My gut says that you might also be supporting clients now with mental health issues, their own, or if you're coaching other leaders or business owners, the mental health issues that are popping up for the people that they support. As a coach right now, you're probably, depending on the work that you do, being asked to support leaders with developing talent development opportunities for a hybrid workforce. How do you coach when some people are face-to-face and some people are online? And in some of the experiences that we're being brought into, you've got people who are virtual and face-to-face at the same time. You might be supporting clients with anticipating and also preparing for future disruption. So helping them be able to figure out when the unknown inevitably happens, how are they prepared? You might also be addressing discrimination, whether that's systemic within an organization or helping root out unconscious bias. I know I'm being asked to do a lot more of that work in the last couple of years in tandem with the racial uprising that's been happening all over the world. And I also have a sense that you're supporting clients, no matter who your clients are, with speaking up for themselves and on behalf of their company. And improv can be used for all of these contexts, and we're going to explore some of them today. So it can be used to bolster communication, confidence, and performance. It can absolutely help on the innovation side of things to help our clients increase their creativity, their flexibility, their problem solving. If in any way you are delivering feedback or you're supporting people who have to deliver feedback, it's really helpful in terms of that piece. It can help to increase connection and to strengthen teams. Improv can be used to heighten a coach's visibility and their own thought leadership. So maybe you find that you are struggling to advocate for yourself in pitches, whether that's for podcasts or speaking opportunities or media opportunities. Improv can be a great tool to master in terms of you being able to speak up more powerfully for your business as a coach. And here's what I know for sure, that everything that we have the opportunity to do as coaches in the improv realm can really be summarized with 5 key principles. And so let's explore those together. And if you are following along in your companion guide, if you haven't already done so, I'm going to encourage you to take notes so that this is not one of those presentations where you have light bulbs going off and then you go back and you think about that presentation a few weeks later after the conference and you think to yourself, there's so much I want to take action on. Where do I start? I know that as we move through, the more you are taking notes and you're making sure you're clear on what your priorities are, the easier it's going to be for you to take action and get the results that you came here for today. So let's look at principle number 1. And that principle is called yes and. Now, if you have any experience with improv, you probably know a little bit about what it means to yes and. In the improv world, much like in coaching, the yes and principle means that we are looking to say yes and then add on with more possibilities so that we are purveyors of opportunity rather than purveyors of obstacle. One of my favorite ways to explain this principle is through an activity. So today you're going to hear me actually describe a lot of specific activities that you can use in conversations that you're having with individual clients or in teams. But one of my favorite ones to do whenever I'm working with a group, whether I'm doing this virtually and we're all looking at each other, let's say on gallery view on a platform like Zoom, or we're doing this in a room and we're standing in a circle, is to ask people to think to themselves, yes, and. Yes, and. I'm going to come back so that you can see me as I'm talking about this. And to just observe as they're looking at the group, again, whether this is virtual or face-to-face, what happens when they're thinking yes, and. And we'll go for about 30 seconds and let people feel what that experience is like. And then I ask people to shake that off and to now think no, but. No, but. And as they're looking around, to just feel that. And I want to tell you that even if I'm doing this with a group that's face-to-face, because I did this last week where we're in person and we're wearing face masks, the principle of yes and becomes so apparent quickly. Because what people will say is that when they are doing the yes and, everything feels lighter and easier and there's connection. But the minute that people are thinking no, but, suddenly we're avoiding eye contact. We're seeing obstacles rather than opportunities. Judgment is setting in. And so I recommend that in having the conversation about what does it look like to come to improv when we're coaching from a yes and perspective, to try that activity. So let's look at some of these other principles now. Number 2 is making others shine. Now, if we think about comedy, let's say stand-up, the goal is often for us to hold the microphone and to be front and center and to make people laugh every 30 seconds. But improv is very different. The reason it works so well in coaching is it's all about elevating everyone, making the team look good. And you'll see in some of the activities that I share how this comes into play. Principle number 3 is harnessing the gift in the present moment. So I shared with you a little bit earlier that one of the mistakes that I used to make when I was pretty new to improv was coming into classes and even in the beginning to my teaching with all of these different scenarios ready so that I always had ideas going into a scene. But that's really not what improv is about. Improv is, like principle number 3 suggests, looking at how do we find what's happening in the here or now, and trusting our instincts that no matter what comes out of our mouths, we'll be able to make it work, that everything is, as Marie Forleo would say, figure outable. Principle number 4, structure will set you and the funny free. So as I'm talking with you today, I'm not going to teach you how to, quote, be funny on demand, because improv and coaching isn't about that. It's about understanding as coaches, what are the structures we go into these respective activities with so that our clients understand what's expected of them. And then they have the freedom to be able to create their answers in the moment. And finally, principle number 5 is that trust is everything. So for improv to work, we have to create spaces where it's okay for our clients to make mistakes. So many of our clients right now are terrified that if they do something wrong, they're going to be called out, or even worse, canceled because they've done something wrong. And so as coaches, I believe one of our greatest gifts is creating opportunities, oftentimes through role play in our improv, to make mistakes, to try out different solutions, to see what works, to receive real-time coaching and feedback from us as we facilitate those responses so that they're able to transfer what works into action. All right. I can almost imagine right now that much like the face of this woman who's looking a little judgy and second guessy, that you might be thinking to yourself, this sounds great, Lex. You can call me Lex in your head at this point because we've been jamming together for about 20 minutes or so. But this is not going to work for me. And you might be filling in the blank, this won't work for me, with one of these reasons. It won't work for me because all of my coaching and training is online. You can let me know in the chat if that's one of your objections. And if it is, I want you to know that every single activity I'm going to share with you during our second half today is an activity that I have led within the last 18 months virtually, if not also face-to-face. So we can cross that out as a reason why this won't work. Now, you might also be saying, Lex, this isn't going to work because I work with executives or I work with engineers or I work with IT professionals. My clients are not a playful group. And if that's one of your objections, what I want you to know is it's all the more reason to use improv because it's setting people up to try different ways of speaking, different ways of thinking that might not be automatic, again, in a safe environment with you, to be able to transfer their learning into action afterwards. Now, you might be thinking, I'm a coach. This is the International Coach Federation Converge 2021 conference. I'm not a trainer. I want you to know that most of the activities I share are designed for a group and are things that you could do one-on-one with a client. You can take the structures that I introduce and you could do this one-on-one. So we've got to cross that off as an excuse for why it won't work. Now, you might also be thinking to yourself, I don't have time for activities. I do 45-minute coaching sessions, or maybe you do lead some group experiences and they're tightly packed. What I would ask you is if there are mindsets and skill sets that you're having to revisit with your clients or with your employees, if you're an internal coach, again and again and again, imagine what would happen if you were able to role play through an activity, that mindset, that skill set, or both. That client or that group of employees that you're working with has an aha, and you don't have to keep coming back to it because they've mastered the mindset or skill set. What I find, particularly when I'm leading a lot of train the trainer experiences, is that coaches will come back to me and say, this activity took 30 minutes to do with a group, and they all mastered something that if I was just doing this in a regular coaching conversation, we might have to have 4 or 5 conversations around. So oftentimes improv actually saves time. And another thing you might be thinking about is improv won't work for me because I'm not a confident speaker. And this is a theme I'm going to come back to again and again, because as somebody who doesn't come naturally to public speaking, I know it used to be one of my excuses. And what I also know is that improv actually made me a more comfortable speaker the more that I was introducing these kinds of activities with my clients. And so if you feel a little bit like this person who wants to make that face, when you think about your own visibility, my hunch is that the number one fear that's running through your head is, what happens if I get asked a question, I find myself in a moment where my mind and my words are not in alignment? What do I do? And my favorite activity to help people get comfortable is called, I want a little flash there, stop and smile. And the activity really means that at any moment, if you're not sure what you are going to say, you can stop, you can smile, make eye contact with your audience, whether that's an audience of 1, an audience of 10, or an audience of 100. And as you are stopping and smiling, you will likely find your next thought. As a result of slowing down, allowing yourself breathing space, you're also much more likely to weed out those filler words, such as like, but, you know. And when we slow down and we stop and smile, we also create credibility, likability for ourselves, and we foster trust with our audiences. So this is an activity I'm going to come back to a little bit later when I start to share curriculum about some fun ways to be able to do it. But I just want you to remember this principle outside of an improv activity, that whenever we are shifting from being a peer coach to a facilitator, and we have group experiences, and we might be using improv, and we're not exactly sure what's going to happen, this is not only an activity we can lead with others, but it's something we can do for ourselves. We can slow down, we can stop and smile, figure out what our next thought is, and then continue on. So now, who is ready to explore 3 different primary categories of where to use improv activities? You can let me know in the chat. Are you ready? I hope so. Okay. Yes, good. So the 3 types of improv-inspired activities, and then we're going to go through some specific activities for each one of these categories, include, number 1, icebreakers. And much like icebreaker suggests, it means that this is the kind of activity we might be doing when we're new to working with an individual or new to working with a group to get people to know each other and get more comfortable. The second category are team building activities. And these are the kind of activities when we want a group to work well together. Maybe we're working with a new group in a workplace. Maybe we're doing some team building because we are self-producing our own coaching experience for clients and we're bringing people together for different realms. But I'm going to share with you some improv activities that work really well when team building is the goal. And then we're also going to look at how do we pick great activities that work when we're looking to develop specific skills, whether that's more effective presentation skills. You might be looking to develop creativity skills with a group, or maybe in terms of skill building, you're wanting activities to help people with innovation. We're going to look at what does that look like. I want to acknowledge that all of the activities that I'm going to be sharing from now through the end of our time together are curated from a program I run, which is Step Into Your Moxie certification. And I want to acknowledge that you have full permission to use these activities without being certified within your coaching work. Okay, with that disclaimer aside, let's explore icebreakers that you could use if you're leading new leader training. The first activity is called Leader Says. So you may be familiar with an activity called Simon Says. Perhaps you played it when you were a young person. Unlike Simon Says, where you're trying to get people out, in Leader Says, you're trying to call people in. And so the activity has a very simple setup. As the leader, you're going to model this first, and you're going to say something like, I'm the leader, and when I'm choosing to be in the spotlight, I'm going to give a physical prompt such as, Alexia says, everybody take up as much space with your body as possible. And then as the facilitator, you're going to invite participants to step forward, whether this is virtual or face-to-face. And you're going to give the direction. When somebody wants to give a physical prompt, they're going to announce themselves with a new physical movement. So let's say you have a group member named Susie. Susie says, get as small as possible and take up as little space. And then if you have a gentleman named Paul, Paul says, do 5 jumping jacks in place. And you're going to allow all participants to step up, announce themselves to the group, and to give a physical movement. I love this activity because it allows people to first introduce themselves to the group by announcing their name, to be able to take up space and get the group warmed up because each person is going to announce themselves with a physical movement prompt. All right, let's move to our second icebreaker activity, which is called Never Have I Ever ... yet. This is another activity that can work when we are virtual or when we are face-to-face. And in this activity, everybody should be looking at each other. So if you're on Zoom, everybody would be on gallery view. If you're doing this face-to-face, everybody might be standing in a circle. And this gives people an opportunity to, again, announce themselves to a group, but also to make a declaration of something that's important to them, but that they simply haven't achieved ... yet. So I, as a facilitator, am going to model this for the group. Never have I ever been on Oprah yet. And then somebody else is going to pop in and announce, never have I ever gone skydiving yet. And in this activity, each participant is going to have an opportunity at least once in any order to stand, to take up space, and to make a declaration of something that they haven't done ... yet. And as you're listening, I hope that you're witnessing how powerful this activity can be for a group to be witnessed naming something that's important to them. So in a workplace context, I've often heard, never have I ever negotiated my salary yet. Or never have I ever been the leader of a team yet. So these are two activities that work really well for ice breaking, whether it's a group you are curating that's working together, or whether this is a group you're being brought into. And the second activity can also work really well if you're working with clients one-on-one. I've often done this with a client back and forth so that they're getting to know me, things I haven't done yet, but I'm also getting a sense from them. What are some of their goals that I'm going to be supporting them to achieve? Again, I'm going to remind you, if you've got some notes written down, it's going to be much easier for you to be able to come back to these activities and lead them. And so I encourage you, if you're not following along in your companion worksheet, even in a journal, just to take some notes on the activities that are sparking your interest so that you can come back and use them. Now we're going to imagine that you have the opportunity to do some team building around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in the first activity under DEI team building, I'm going to share, it's an activity called It Ain't Right. So I like to lead high stakes conversations when I'm coming in as a coach from a playful perspective that allows people to just start to witness everyday grievances and then move into more substantive injustices. And It Ain't Right is a great activity to facilitate that. So the way this activity works is that as the coach or facilitator, you're going to begin by giving all participants permission to say, it ain't right, and to name something that they're witnessing that isn't right. And I will usually model with one of those everyday grievances. So it ain't right that most of us are only able to sleep 7 or 8 hours a night rather than 10 or 11 hours a day. I might model something else that's pretty benign. It ain't right that in Las Vegas, it's 115 degrees most days in the summer. And I'm going to then give participants an opportunity to share their it ain't rights. And usually humor starts to come out just from the simple structure of, what are you noticing? Then if everybody's had an opportunity to move through the activity, I'm going to encourage people now to start naming things that aren't right that they're witnessing. So for example, somebody might say, it ain't right that most of the senior leaders in our organization are white men. Somebody might say, it ain't right that there's not pay equity in our organization. If I'm working with groups, let's say of fellow coaches, they might say something like, it ain't right that only certain people are being asked to go after visibility opportunities, and I'm not seeing people who look like me enough in the media. This is an activity where, as a coach, it gives us a sense of what are the injustices that people are witnessing, and then guides us in terms of what's the follow-up going to look like? What do we need to be coaching around? And it lets a team start to cohere around what are the issues that are important to them. The second activity I want to introduce is called You're Canceled. And this one is great when a team has been working together for a little while to call out the very real fear for a lot of leaders, whether they are emerging or more senior, that if they get something wrong, it's going to have a really negative impact on their career, on other people's on their likability and how other people trust them. And this activity has 2 rounds. In the first round of You're Canceled, you're going to ask people to identify for themselves a reason that they could imagine they've really offended. And they're never going to name it out loud. They're just going to say to themselves, it might be that they said something that had some gender bias and they were called out for that. Or it might be that they said something that was unknowingly racist or something that was ableist, but they're going to identify that for themselves. Then the coach/facilitator, I know I go back and forth between both of those terms, but I'm referring to you as the coach. You are going to name randomly different participants in the group, and you're going to use this structure. Name the person. So Matilda, you're canceled. Or Jose, you're canceled. Joe, you're canceled. And when you say the name of a person, you're going to give them the structure to respond with, which is, you can't cancel me because ... And so when you call out the name of the person, so let's say, Joe, you're canceled. Joe is going to say, Alexia, you can't cancel me because I was a straight A student, so I know what it was like to be bullied. Or you can't cancel me, Alexia, because I'm a nose picker and I have rights too. The goal in this first round is to give people permission to try to defend themselves. And then afterward, to have a conversation about, so what was that experience like? And what's probably going to come up as a coach if you're asking those provocative questions is, it felt like I was defending rather than taking responsibility for having canceled or for having caused harm. So then in this activity, you're going to have a second round. And in the second round, you're going to do the same thing as the coach. You're going to say, you're canceled, Joe, or you're canceled, Matilda, or you're canceled, Jose. Only this time the person is going to account for what they did wrong. Now, remember, you're never giving them the reason, but you ask them at the beginning of this activity to imagine a reason that they could be canceled or called out. And the structure here is to name what they did wrong and how they will repair the harm. So for example, I'm sorry, Alexia, that I caused you harm. I will ask for people's preferred pronouns rather than make assumptions moving forward. Or I'm sorry, Alexia, that I made an assumption that you came from a particular socioeconomic background. I will stay curious and ask questions rather than make assumptions moving forward. Now, the key to this activity, like any activity, is what you do as a coach after the activity to help people make meaning for themselves. So at the end of this activity, you might ask, how did it feel in the first round to devise excuses versus in the second round to actually account for what you did wrong? You could ask a question as a coach like, what thoughts, feelings, and sensations came up for you as you imagined and took ownership for causing harm? As a coach, you might ask a juicy question afterward, like, how can you help your clients and employees take responsibility for their mistakes and prioritize impact over intentions moving forward? Let's now transition to looking at our third category, creativity and innovation, when the goal is skill building. So remember, I introduced stop and smile a little bit earlier, but let's imagine that you're working with a team where they're trying to build their skills and thinking out of the box, or maybe they are product designers and you've been brought in as a coach to support them with innovation. I love coming in with activities that have a simple structure that promotes humor, but allows people to find their answers in the moment, what improv is all about. So with the principle of stop and smile, this activity requires you to have a prop. So I'm holding for you first words cards. So if you ever have had a child, you might be familiar. These are to teach children new words. And so for this activity, I use them. And as the facilitator, the structure is, tell me about your new invention. And in this activity, I pulled 2 cards without thinking. So here I just pulled robot and shoes. So tell me, I might say to a participant, about how you created robot shoes. And that participant needs to now, for 30 seconds to a minute, answer it using stop and smile. I got the idea for robot shoes from the time I had a dream. And I recognize that I need shoes that allow me to be able to fly to avoid traffic in the morning. And as a result, I came into the field and I decided that I was going to manufacture shoes that allowed people to fly. And then you get the idea. And then I would go to the next participant and I would say, tell me about how you created a bike hat. And it gives people the opportunity to practice stopping and smiling, make a fake pitch for something that they didn't invent. And it can be wonderful for creativity and innovation skill building. The second activity I'm going to introduce for creativity and innovation when we're trying to develop that skill is called problem, cause, solution. And in this structure, you're going to identify a problem. So the problem might be children don't fall asleep at bedtime. And then a participant, and this is going to be somewhat popcorn style like all the other activities. So somebody's going to raise their hand and they're going to identify the cause of that problem and their solution for it. So in my fake example, the problem, children are not falling asleep at bedtime. A participant is then going to say the cause. So the reason that people are not falling asleep at bedtime is that children are wound up and not ready to go to bed. And here's my solution. I'm inventing a melatonin diffuser that clips onto a child's bed and it diffuses melatonin to make children sleepy at bedtime. This is another activity, much like Stop and Smile, that gives people an opportunity to come up with ideas somewhat rapid fire without any attachment to using them, but can be a great introductory activity to then help people think about new solutions for problems that they might be experiencing. My hope is as you listen to these different activities, you've identified for yourself, based on what you're supporting clients or employees around, different ways that you can use improv in your practice. And for those of you who are moving back and forth between online or hybrid, meaning you have some people that you're working with online and some people face-to-face simultaneously, here are some good tips. Number one, ensure that everybody is on camera when you're using improv activities. Now, I know a lot of people are working from home. It's possible that there could be child or animal disruptions. And I'll usually introduce that I'd rather have extra people pop on camera by having, a child or an animal walk across your screen rather than having you be absent and just normalizing that disruptions might happen. But we need people to be present in order to be able to do improv as a team and work effectively. If you're straddling virtual, having a facilitator who's in the room, if you have some people who are live, and that there's one person who's on Zoom will help a lot, whether you're the person in the room and you have somebody who is on Zoom or whether it's vice versa, so that you can collaborate in making sure that everyone's getting their needs met. And then I introduced to you earlier, starting with a think yes, a yes and activity, and then that no but enables people to experience improv. And it just makes everything a little bit easier. And so I also want to give you an invitation to create your own improv activity. You can identify the mindset or the skill set that you need people to develop, and then come up with a simple structure that's going to allow them to do it. You want to establish a clear structure like what I gave you in each of those activities, one primary prompt, so that people feel comfortable and free to be able to be innovative in the activity itself. You want to practice delivering step-by-step instructions aloud so that when you lead the activity, you are clear and people know how to participate. And as I modeled after the I'm canceled activity, as a coach, you want to focus on facilitation as much as the activity, because that's where the real aha moments come from, when people are able to account for what they learned as a result of the activity. And of course, you want to have fun, because when you are having fun, it's going to give other people permission to do the same. I want you to remember that your clients and your employees, they don't care about improv. They care about solving their problems. So I recommend that you don't talk a lot about improv. Instead, focus on the outcomes on the other side of it, so that improv becomes the means to the ends that they want. And so I want to ask you now to think about, how will you carry forward what we described today? What are your 2 or 3 top takeaways, and put those into the chat? How will you integrate improv into your coaching and training? What will be the likely payoff for your clients when you do so? And how can improv perhaps even open up new possibilities for you in terms of programs to be able to sell? And I would love to hear your thoughts in the chat. And I'd also love to invite you to continue the conversation. So if you're lit up by where we went today in terms of exploring improv-inspired activities, you can head to bookcorporategigs.com for more activities that you can use in your coaching practice. And if you are somebody who's here today because you want to amplify your own voice, your own visibility, and your influence while showing your clients or employees how to do the same, I'd love to share more with you about my Step Into Your Moxie certification program so that you can level up your own public speaking, facilitation, persuasive communication skills, and use improv in your coaching with individuals and groups to be able to help the people that you support. So you've got details for where to learn more about that offering. And then, of course, I'm on social media. LinkedIn is one of my favorite platforms. And so if you haven't done so already, be sure to connect with me there. Let me know that you are a part of this session. And I'd love to hear what activity or activities you're committed to using in your coaching. And I want to end by saying, if you know that your ideas can positively, perhaps radically, improve people's lives, businesses, careers, health as a coach, and you know that a key piece of your work is helping people with mindset and skill set, it's not only an opportunity, it's really a responsibility to be creative in terms of bringing new tools into your coaching toolbox to serve. And I would be delighted to know that improv is one of those tools that you're using for all the reasons that we discussed today. Thank you so much for coming and playing, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Take care.